Want to go to Senator Tim Scott, the South Carolina Republican, is running for the presidential nomination. Kind enough to join us. Senator, it's always great seeing you. I was thinking of these protests and what you had said a few days ago, calling on the United States to revoke visas that foreign students receive to be in this country, and that if they have them, just revoke them if they're part of these anti-Israeli protests. Do you still stand by that?
Well, certainly. Now, let me clarify what I said, because what I said was that when we have students on campuses that are actually encouraging Jewish genocide, who are advocating for murder and supporting terrorism, those students should be expelled from the campus, and those folks who are on visas should be deported from our country. I stand by that without any question. I wasn't being hyperbolic then. I'm not being hyperbolic now. Anytime you actually encourage for the genocide, the elimination of an entire race of people, anytime you support terrorism and encourage murder, there should be consequences. It should be consequences for those students, and it should be consequences for those universities. Back in 2016, Neil, I worked on legislation to eliminate the anti-Semitism that we see on college campuses. Things have gotten worse, not better. Jewish students do not feel safe on their own campuses. That is a problem that we need to focus on, and my legislation helps us get there. And if I were president, I would simply sign the legislation that forces these universities and colleges to take back control of their college campuses.
Let me ask you, as we're on the Israeli war, Senator, you would argue that maybe when it comes to aid, we'd have to kind of reshift our focus and attention from Ukraine, I don't want to misquote you, to Israel. You would call that the $106 billion plan that was intended to help both countries bad, that it was a bad deal. What did you mean by that?
Well, the $106 billion that focuses more on Ukraine than it does the immediate threat to our ally in the Middle East, Israel, is wrong directed. The focus should be on Israel. We should have a standalone package for Israel. We know that that would unite the vast majority of the House and the Senate, and the president could sign it. We should provide Israel with a clear picture of a unified America in support of their efforts to eliminate Hamas as a threat for the rest of Israel's existence, which requires the wiping Hamas off the map. This is a clear, consistent, and concise message from America to our ally, Israel. We should deal with Ukraine separately. If we did that, you would have the kind of support from Congress that does send a clear message to the world. We are loyal to our allies, and we will be lethal to our adversaries.
Your fellow South Carolinian, Nikki Haley, does not agree with that. She says be tough and supportive of both Ukraine and Israel. You say?
Well, listen, I will simply say that it is important for us to focus on Israel now. We've provided over $100 billion over the last 2 years to Ukraine. I have supported resources for Ukraine. We also need the kind of accountability in the Ukraine funding that we do not need today in the Israeli funding. So why not bifurcate the matter, keep America focused on the current situation, and we can continue to manage the resources and the accountability. Frankly, the third thing we have to do, Neil, is to focus on our southern border. The one thing I can tell you is that the people who've crossed our border from Yemen, from Syria, from Iran, from Iraq, number in the thousands. As a result of that, our own national security assessment puts us more vulnerable than we've ever been in the last several years. By having the resources for our southern border, having focused on Israel, and then continuing to have the kind of management and the accountability necessary to support Ukraine, do it separately so the American people see clarity and leadership and accountability on all three fronts. It's time for us to act now.
You know, a lot of people are focusing on the next debate, Senator, and as things stand now, you wouldn't make it. As things stand now, do you fear that if you don't make it, your campaign's over?
We'll be on the debate stage, Neil. We have the polls are in, and we qualify for the debate. We are a few hundred or so donors short. We have the resources, but we need the numbers. You need 70,000 donors. We're almost there.
So you make it in the polls, you don't make it as yet on the donors. I just want to explain that, but finish that thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
we have the percentage that you need to be on the debate stage. We're a few hundred short on the number of donors that we need. That's why you can go to votetimscott.com. Donate $1. Join the team.
Okay. The reason why I mentioned it, and these are just a smattering of headlines. I
Yes.
followed on all the candidates, and with you, you're hearing one headline in the Hill: shifting resources to Iowa in the campaign there is beginning to stutter. Another writes that the leading White House team is saying that there's a misread when you first had to run for president, that maybe your staff didn't serve you well. Even some of your supporters are disappointed in the campaign, the way it's going thus far. That's from Politico. That your super PAC right now is pulling some ads in some key campaign struggles because of this. What do you make of all of that? Where there's smoke, there's fire, and maybe things are kind of burning out on you.
Well, I can just tell you, Neil, we have more money on hand in our campaign account than any other candidate save President Donald Trump today. And so our resources are good, number one. Number two, we have focused on Iowa because we believe that a faith-filled message is the way that we break out and run to the finish line and become the nominee. Number three, all the stories that you're talking about, I have not had the good fortune of reading, but what I can tell you is that what's really important is that if you want the one person whose personal life story destroys the narrative of the radical left, if you want the one guy who actually wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and delivered the largest tax cut in the history of our country, votetimscott.com. I'm your guy.
So let me just get your sense back to the Israeli conflict, if I can, sir, that
Yes,
we are
absolutely.
urging the Israelis, again, if you believe these reports, that the Pentagon is saying go slow on a ground offensive. I don't know whether it's meant more to get all hostages out of there or to get more people to find safe passage out of there, but it might be kind of holding the Israelis back. What do you think of that?
I think the Biden administration speaks with a forked tongue. At one point, they're saying publicly to Netanyahu and to Israel, go in and do what's necessary to save future lives, to end Hamas. And at the same time, they're saying, do not go in with the invasion so that we can do whatever it is that the Biden administration thinks needs to be done. You and I had this conversation just recently. I said then, and I'll say it again. Now that we understand that more than 500 fighters were trained in Iran, this administration is complicit. One of the challenges that we see today is that when you have the Biden administration showing weakness, it invites conflict, but today it's inviting chaos and misdirection. Israel needs us to stand firm, to have clear direction, which basically says start the invasion when you know it's in the best interest of the IDF and Israel. We will have your back. End of sentence.
Got it. Senator Tim Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.